Hey everyone, Chris here. First off, before we get into the show, I just want to say thank you to all of you who have tuned in this year. We're coming up on the 1 year anniversary of the show, and Perry and I could not do this show without your listens, your support, your feedback. So as we come to the close of the year, I wanted to say thank you for listening. We greatly appreciate it. I know we've had a bit of a delay recently. I've had school, we've had some family emergencies. It's kind of kept Perry and I from recording together for a bit. But I think we're through a lot of those hurdles, and in January we're looking to get on a more regular schedule, and we have some really fun episodes in store for you. So, in the meantime, I would love it if you could help us out. If you could like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter and Facebook at WatchingCast. That's a great way to be part of the conversation. Let us know what movies we should be watching, what movies we should be talking about. Ask us any questions. Also, please feel free to leave a review on iTunes. This is a great way to help us get noticed and get a larger audience so that we can continue to do this show and continue to build the conversation up a bit. If you like what you're hearing and you want to contribute, we do offer a Patreon. The link to that is in the show notes. Anything you can contribute is great. Again, it defrays the cost of seeing movies, cost of getting this thing edited. We'd greatly appreciate it. And finally, we want to hear from you. We want your feedback. This is our top 10 episode of the year. I want to hear your top 10. We want to share them on the air. So if you can email us at we'rewatchinghere@gmail.com, we'd love to hear from you, hear your thoughts, and share your thoughts on the air. Again, thank you so much for your support over the last year. I think 2020 is going to be an even greater year for this podcast. Hey everyone, I'm Chris.
I'm Beth.
And I'm Matt.
Join us every Wednesday for Wasting Time, our podcast where we talk about pop culture, life, and our favorite things.
From the movies we love to the TV shows we're obsessed with.
And from politics to parenting to whatever else is on our mind.
Give us a listen each Wednesday and then find us on Facebook and Twitter to tell us what you're loving.
We're part of the Big Heads Media Group, and we can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever else you find your podcasts. Come waste some time with us.
This podcast is part of the Big Heads Media Podcast Network. Go to bigheadsmedia.com for more great podcasts.
And now, on with the show.
Hey everyone, welcome to...
We're watching here. We're watching here.
This is Opinionated Movie Talk with Chris and Perry. My name is Chris Williams. With me, he is the Rick Dalton to my Cliff Booth, the Russell Bufalino to my Frank Sheeran, the Thomas Wake to my Ephraim Winslow, and the Grizzle Shanks to my Rum Tum Tugger, Perry Seibert.
I gladly take all of those roles. I realized that Grizzleshanks and Rum Tum Tugger could easily be the name of the characters in The Lighthouse.
They very well could. This is our end-of-year extravaganza. This is our 10 favorite movies of 2019. And, Perry, it feels like the last 2 months I have done nothing but watch movies.
I know, isn't it the best?
It is.
I agree. It's my favorite time of the year.
It is so overwhelming, though. I've been trying to do, because I've had school, so I have caught up on far less than I've even wanted. But even so, even with all the stuff I still haven't seen, I still haven't gotten around to 1917. I haven't gotten around to Portrait of a Lady on Fire, or I never got a screener for Pain and Glory. And I still had trouble cutting my top 10 list down.
Interesting. I had the opposite problem where I went through my so I here's how I tend to do it. First of all, I guess this is the time for this disclaimer, right? I don't believe in top 10 lists.
Okay.
I think they're a game. And I don't mean to say that I don't mean them. I just mean to say that they really don't accomplish anything. They're a snapshot. That's all they are. If I made this list tomorrow, it would be different. I literally made this list this morning just because I figured that's the only safe way to do it. And I looked through my list of everything I saw this year, and all I did was write down, I copied it over to another piece of paper if I thought that's a film I'd think of as being in my top 10, and I had 10 movies. I didn't plan it that way, but that's just the way it worked out this time around. So, and I'll be honest, looking at the list, my top 5 are the best of the best. The next 3 are like just a half step down from those. And honestly, my 9 and 10 spots could have gone to a whole bunch of different movies that on a different day I might have thought, yeah, that's a top 10 film.
Yeah, I'm the same way. My top 10, or my number 10, it switched back and forth between what it ended up being and 2 or 3 movies that didn't even end up making my top 10 list. And yeah, the whole idea is top 10 lists are kind of an obligatory critics thing. You know, we do them. They're kind of fun to do, but same thing. Like, I've been putting together, spoiler alert, in about a month or so, we're going to do a top 10 of the decade. And I can look back and say, you know, a lot of films I didn't even rank in my top 10 that year show up on my best of the decade. So it's a purely arbitrary thing. Baggage settles over time, and
absolutely.
But it's fun, and
so much fun.
It's a nice way just to talk about the year. So we do want to have the caveat that we have not seen Cats yet, so we're kind of writing this. It's the assumption that that's our number 1 pick. So it's the Cats memorial list.
We'll see. We'll see.
I'm just saying. I'm just saying. I think Martin Scorsese really drew on the digital fur technology for de-aging everyone in The Irishman. And
I mean, if you enjoy a digitally rosy-faced Robert De Niro, then yes, you're going to love an Idris Elba that's been morphed into a half feline. It's just something you didn't know it's something you didn't know you didn't want to see until it was thrown in front of you during a trailer.
And if you think James Corden is adorable now, wait till you see him as a cat. There is no way. There is no way that's annoying.
The whole everything about this movie bothers me.
Yes.
Everything except Idris Elba, and what annoys me about Idris Elba is that he's in it. Like, otherwise, I have almost everybody else in that cast is an uphill climb for me. Like, and it's just we finally found a film that will challenge my patience more than the Hobbit trilogy. It's the last time I was like, no, I'm just not gonna go see it. I don't care. I can't possibly care. And I'm really close to that point with Cats, and it takes a lot for me to get to that point with a movie.
I'm so there. A little inside baseball. Perry and I had 2 Detroit film critics screening days where we sat down and watched something like 7 or 8 films within 2 days, and I was positive Universal was going to force Cats on us that day. And I think that might have been the only way I could have endured it, was to be in a room with other people who hate it.
I think they're hiding. I don't think it's got any serious awards consideration. They'll try for the song, but otherwise, I think they're doing to this what they did to Greatest Showman. I think they're going to assume that this is going to have a giant audience that is that will come regardless, and so they'll just play it safe and not take the abuse they would take for putting themselves out front so grandly and just collect a lot of money, which I'm sure it will probably do. Let's put it this way: it'll probably make more money than the Marwen movie Last Christmas.
Well, if there's any justice. So we'll talk about good movies now. We will get into our top 10 list. And the way this works is Perry and I are going to just kind of switch off. And if one of us has a movie that is a little bit higher on the other person's list, we'll wait until that person's list to talk about it. But Perry, why don't you kick us off? What was your number 10?
I toss the tennis ball in the air and slap a serve to you, Chris, with my number 10 spot, The Last Black Man in San Francisco. A first film from a director named Joe Talbot, co-written with a man named Jimmy Fails, who is the star of the film, along with Jonathan Majors. This was an indie that came, I think, out of Sundance early in the year. It's on my list because it's easily one of the 5, if not 3, best photographed films I saw all year. The cinematography is gorgeous. It's this great little arty tale about a man who is trying to reconcile with his past and find his place in a very gentrified San Francisco. And it it's the kind of film that does not take place in the real world, although it comments a lot on the real world. And if you pick up on some hints in the movie and go do some research, you will be rewarded for doing so. That all comes after the actual experience of watching the movie, which, as I said, is a joy because it just looks so good. They just know where to put the camera in a different and unusual place and how to light everything so that it's just this great sort of fairy tale-ish but not otherworldly universe that they build, which is exactly right for the tone of the writing in the movie. It's a great first film. I think it's the most exciting. It is the highest ranking first film on my list this year, and it was just a pleasure to discover. It's one of those things where I knew very little about it going in and was just completely impressed by the opening sequence, and that just rode that wave for 2 hours. It's a really great movie.
That's The Last Black Man in San Francisco, and it has been throughout the fall one of those movies that was always the next one I was going to catch up with. It was one of those ones. The screener came, and I had my stack, and kind of kept prioritization kept changing, and then I just still haven't caught up with that one, but I really want to see that. I've heard great things about it. So that just kind of adds it in. I'll have to catch up on it really quick then. So my number 10 is also the same as your number 9, and that is James Gray's Ad Astra.
Yes, indeed.
The sci-fi movie from this fall. This is really, to me, this is the movie I hoped Interstellar would be a few years ago. Chris Nolan's Interstellar, which I was hoping would be this grounded sci-fi movie that would feel somewhat plausible and maybe kind of have a little bit more depth to it. And I didn't get that with Interstellar. I got a nice try with Interstellar. That didn't quite work for me. Ad Astra is a movie that really, I enjoyed it sitting with it, but then over the next few weeks, it was a movie that did not leave me. And I think a lot of that is due to Brad Pitt's performance. We're going to probably talk a lot more about Brad Pitt later in this podcast as well. But I think this might be one of my favorite Brad Pitt performances. He takes all that charisma he has so naturally in other roles, and he just shuts it off. And he is just kind of pared down to a nub as this efficient, expert person, but it's depression played as efficiency. There's this void in him, even as he's so competent, even as he's so focused on his mission. I really think Brad Pitt is great, and then he's thrown into this movie with world building that I couldn't get enough of. The vision of the moon in this movie, with its Applebee's and all its advertising, it felt very sadly plausible. There are genre tropes that James Gray throws in that are employed in ways I haven't seen before. I think you and I briefly talked about this movie before I saw it, and you had mentioned the car chase.
Yes.
And it is like nothing I have seen before. Like, the way they employ those vehicles on the moon is this haunting, terrifying, and yet exciting car chase. Brad Pitt reunites with the Space Monkeys again in a scene that is just one of the most unexpected and terrifying moments I had at a movie all year. And then it keeps pushing, and it pushes into some very spiritual themes. This is a movie about someone searching for a God who probably isn't there, or at worst is disinterested in us. Mm-hmm. And I think its final passages with Tommy Lee Jones, they're really powerful and really haunting, that I'll even forgive when it kind of turns into a superhero movie at the end of the movie. But yeah, I loved Ad Astra. It stuck with me much longer than I thought, and I really appreciate that this is what James Gray decided to do with the sci-fi genre.
I will say that where we differ is this is a film that I don't love. I respect. It's one that the last there's the best scene in the movie happens with about an hour to go. That sequence when he records the message
on Mars,
that's going to be sent out, and the aftermath of doing that, that I think the film reaches everything it's trying for, where it is suddenly close to actually being Tarkovsky. It's close to being Kubrick. It's close to being the psychological sci-fi film that I knew James Gray was capable of making. And then for me, that last passage with Tommy Lee Jones, while fine, there's nothing wrong with it. The problem is it is too perfectly written. There's no other way the film can end. There's no drama for me in the last 45 minutes of this movie. I've realized where it has to go. And that inevitability is, exactly the opposite of, and not that it's fair to hold the film up to this standard, but I think this film is asking to be held up to that standard. This is why the ending of 2001 has remained amazing forever. Because it's totally logical, but you still, A, don't know what's going to happen, and B, still can't quite explain it.
Yeah.
And this film is so steeped in psychology and in you express it beautifully. It's a man on a search for God, but I kind of know from how they've set it up that he's gonna come to a place where he's okay with that, and I don't feel like I'm spoiling anything by saying that.
Sure.
Because I think the film makes it really obvious, and so that's what keeps it for me when I said my top 8 are a step above my 9 and 10. That's the step that's keeping it just underneath. It just doesn't quite break through into saying this is an amazing movie. I think it's a great movie. I'm so glad James Gray made it. He's one of my favorite directors. And I agree wholeheartedly on Brad Pitt, we'll talk about Brad Pitt a lot more in a little bit. I can't think of a better Brad Pitt vehicle. I can't think of a performance where he owns the screen like this. And as you said, does so with so little. He does not, it's not a big performance by any means. And even the big showcase scene, which he's going to get, he is not hysterical. It's a little amped up, but it is still far removed from scenery chewing, hand me my Oscar work. It's really great. It's a really fantastic piece of acting, which is the other reason it is higher up than any other film that isn't quite breaking through that threshold for me into outright 4-star greatness.
Fair enough. And yeah, I think it is, when you start getting to the 9s and 10s, there's that imperfection that kind of is in a little more of these movies. And my number 10 for the longest time was a movie we might talk about if we get to honorable mentions. But it was a movie that I think is probably technically better and left me a lot colder. And at the end of the day, it was the fact that I kept wrestling. I was really impressed with the way this film was kind of a metaphor for atheism, which I found fascinating to wrestle with. But yeah, it definitely, those last 20, 30 minutes get shaky, especially about the time he's surfing through the universe. Gets a little shaky there. So that was your number 9. My number 9 has a bit of a link to Ad Astra, but I think we're going to be talking about that one a little bit later. So what was your number 8?
Our number 8s are actually the same.
Yes, they are.
Which is super exciting. I was amazed, and I think I don't want to say disappointed, but a little like, I'm both happy and disappointed by how this works out. much like my reaction to a movie on your list that we'll get to in a little bit. But yes, we both have The Lighthouse at number 8.
Yes. What did you love about The Lighthouse?
Here's the thing. This is the film on the list that probably was the one that grew on me the most.
Okay.
And it is my great regret that I have not seen it a second time, because I know that I missed chunks of really good dialogue. I just couldn't understand it some of the time in the theater I was in. And that was frustrating. So I am eager to see it a second time. And that's always a big deal for me. If I get to see a film a second time, that really will solidify it being on a list like this for me or not. But I don't think there is a film whose images have stuck with me more this year than The Lighthouse. And I love, I remember reading about people talking about it online and social media, and somebody was asking everybody to dig in on this, and they were fighting about it back and forth. And I said, look, I'm a film nerd. You had me at the 1.19 to 1 aspect ratio. You know, and using lenses from the 1920s. Yes, do that. Now, granted, that wouldn't be enough for it to make my list, let alone make it high enough that I say it's in my 4-star range. It's there because Robert Eggers, the director, managed to make a film that feels like the follow-up to his excellent first film, The Witch, and isn't the same film. And that's great. I feel like we have solidified a really great voice that I am eager to see continue to develop and grow over the coming years. It's not quite a horror film, not the way The Witch is. It's the film this year that I think owes more to David Lynch than any film I've seen in a really long time. And for all those reasons, I don't even, as good as the performers are, I don't even think of it as their movie, because I didn't get caught up in the real emotional struggle going on there. This was a real cerebral game for me to play to watch this movie. It was like, okay, well, what is he getting at? What does that mean? Because you are constantly reminded, because of the cinematography, that you are having an aesthetic experience. You're not with these characters per se. You are forced to sort of experience and enter their mindscape. And that's a really, really ambitious thing for any director to do, especially on their second film, especially on a budget that I'm assuming was pretty shoestring for how good this film looks. And all that makes The Lighthouse, for me, one of the great cinematic experiences of the year.
Yeah, I'm totally on board with you there. I was a big fan of The Witch when it came out, which is really just a delicious slow burn of a movie that just kind of keeps twisting and turning and upping the tension until it kind of hits that last 20 minutes. The Lighthouse is kind of a fever dream from the start. And I watched this at night. I watched this on a screener late at night on my couch. And I'm still not convinced I didn't dream half of the things that are in this movie. Just like you're saying, that cinematography, that claustrophobic aspect ratio, the black and white photography, it just makes you feel soggy at the end of the movie. But it careens between tones. It's not that slow burn of The Witch. It's at times very funny, and it's a very dark comedy about a roommate from hell, basically. And then it descends into madness in ways that really just unnerved me. He plays with visuals, like you were saying, in this movie in a way that just, they sear themselves on your brain. Like, there's a scene where one character is pummeling another one, and he begins hallucinating things, and the images on there just are so shocking and so bizarre. And then I don't know if there's been a final image this year that has haunted me the way that last shot does. It just such a horrifying final shot. But I could also watch Willem Dafoe do this character over and over. He is the sea captain from The Simpsons, possessed by the devil. It's so, like, I could not make out half of the things he was saying, but I love that he was saying them.
Exactly. I feel like I got it, even if I didn't.
Yeah. I mean, Robert Eggers is really becoming a go-to person for kind of capturing this American folklore, these horrifying American stories. And I think the thing that he does is he just draws you into the insanity of that moment. And I think he does it differently with The Witch than he does here, but I think they are both just kind of overwhelming visions. And, there's a lot of the, quote, new horror that's out there that it kind of leaves me cold, but he's someone who I keep wanting to see what he's going to do next. And, yeah.
And I love an ear for dialogue is a terrible phrase, because it sounds like people speaking like people normally speak. And no, both of his films are written in this great, super stylized verbiage and totally different from each other. Mm-hmm. That's what the Coen brothers do. Like he and this is of course co-written with his brother Max. This is it's an impressive. I bet it would be an impressive read as much as we gush about the visuals, I bet it's a pretty good screenplay read too.
Oh yeah, and I do feel like Dafoe gets a lot of the attention, but I think Pattinson is really strong here too, because he has to really play that descent into madness, whereas Dafoe's kind of there already. But I mean, there's a scene with Pattinson just dancing, and it's unhinging just to watch him do this kind of delirious dance and feel that cabin fever. I really dug this movie.
Cool.
So next up is number 7, and why don't I take this? We have some similarities too. It's not the same movie, but I think the similarities are kind of interesting. So my number 7 is the documentary Amazing Grace. This is the documentary that covers the recording of Aretha Franklin's best-selling gospel album over 2 nights in Los Angeles about 50 years ago. And this movie's backstory is really fascinating because Sidney Pollack filmed this as a documentary, but he had no experience doing a documentary at that point, did not sync the sound up correctly, and this movie was thought lost to time. The album went on to become a huge success, but this making of document was thought lost to time until probably, I think it was about 5-6 years ago, producer stepped in, began the meticulous process of restoring it. Then it got caught up in legal wrangles with Aretha Franklin's family until I think just last year it was released at a film festival and had its theatrical release this year. And the result is something that is really amazing to watch. If this were just 90 minutes of Aretha Franklin singing gospel songs, it could still find its way on my list, I'm sure. Because that voice singing these songs is just one of the great experiences. I saw this in a in a theater. I didn't see it on screener. And the result was like a church service. People were swaying in the theater. I am a very reserved person when I sit in a movie theater, and I was tapping my toes and kind of swaying along because there's just something about that voice. But what I really love about this movie is it is a testament to the hard work of making art. The key image to this movie is Aretha Franklin's face coated in perspiration. She is sweating. Mm-hmm. She is throwing herself into this. And then throughout the movie, you see it's not just her working. It's James Cleveland's backup choir that is working alongside with her. It's the choir masters who are making sure every note is hit. The young kid who brings her, it wasn't a young kid, in my mind it was, but this person who brings her a water because she's getting thirsty. There are points in the movie where you see a producer gesturing wildly at a cameraman to get a certain shot. And you just begin to see all the work to bring this together. And yet, if you listen to that album, it sounds effortless. It sounds very organic. And this also has just one of my favorite shots of the year, which is looking out at the crowd. And it's this packed church in Los Angeles. And it's mostly people there to hear Aretha Franklin's music. But the camera starts to focus, and you realize along the back wall is a young Mick Jagger. And he's clapping. But as soon as your brain registers that it's Mick Jagger, everyone else in the crowd stands up and blocks the view of him. Almost like, yeah, it's not about him. So I found this to just be a wonderful experience, just a wonderful concert film. It went beyond that. And then as someone who really appreciates the songs she's singing and the context behind them, I really found it felt like a church service, and it was one of the most fantastic film-going experiences I had all year, and it has not left me since April. So I highly recommend it. It's didn't get much of a release, but it's out there and it's on DVD now, so I would really recommend people check it out.
I'm eager to see it. It's the one film on your list I have not seen.
Okay.
And so, that's on me. I would. There's nothing about this I don't want to see. I just haven't gotten to it yet. I'm sure it's as excellent as you say.
It is fantastic. But what was your 7, though?
Well, my 7 is also a music documentary that also repurposes old footage, and that is Martin Scorsese's Rolling Thunder Review. It's a Rolling Thunder Review a Bob Dylan film by Martin Scorsese. I forget the full title on all this. This was the Netflix release in the summer that coincided with the release of Dylan's the massive box set of 6 full shows from the Rolling Thunder Revue concerts in the mid-'70s. This is, I will admit, this is probably the most idiosyncratic film on the list for me. These are two artists I greatly adore, working together, not for the first time. And what I love about it is, and we can go back to, for those who are just joining us for the first time, go back and listen to our episode on documentaries to find out my tortured history with that particular style of filmmaking. And this does what I want a documentary to do. I want documentaries to address the fact that they are creations. I feel that documentaries get a lot of mileage out of the belief that they take for granted that we think everything there is true and real and captured in the moment, when a good documentary can be just as manufactured as any fiction film. This film splits that hair in a really glorious and hilarious way that some viewers may not even grasp because Bob doesn't want you to. Dylan has always, from the beginning, he's been a fabricated figure. He has controlled his public persona really strongly. And so he has almost always done that. No, he's always done that in order to get you to pay attention to the music as much as possible. He has accepted that he had to be figure. He was considered the voice of a generation, and his response to that was to go away for 2 years, to fake a motorcycle accident and stay out of the public limelight for a while, because even he couldn't control it anymore. This is some of the best music that Dylan ever made is in this period. It's arguably the best live band he ever had at his disposal. And the live music performances are just they're revelatory. If you don't know this period, you're going to hear songs like you've never heard them before, and you're going to come across songs that you maybe didn't know about, and you're like, oh, what's that from? All of the songs from Desire, which was the big album at the time, are done better live than they are on the record, and they're real good on the record. There's nothing wrong with that record. And as it goes on, you may start to question what it is you're watching, and you're supposed to, and that is half the fun of this journey. I love this movie because it is a wonderful mix of an amazing concert documentary mixed with, I have a dear friend, Stephen Thomas Erlewine, the music critic, who once said of Jack White, I said, what do you think of Jack White? And he said, well, he's full of bullshit, but his bullshit is so much more entertaining than almost anybody else's. And that's a lot of what's going on with Dylan in this period. That's a lot of what's going on with Dylan most of the time. So yes, as a perfect companion piece to the Dylan the Dylan documentary that Scorsese made a few years ago, No Direction Home, you can't do better at getting summing up 2 very different eras of Dylan in a really great, hugely entertaining, and incredibly cinematic way. Rolling Thunder Revue. It's on Netflix now.
Well, I'm really glad. I know you're a big fan of Martin Scorsese, so I was really glad you were able to get a film of his on the list this year.
I know. It's so good that we can get at least one on every year. The man doesn't disappoint.
Yeah. Well, that brings us to number 6. And what's your number 6?
My number 6 appears higher on your list, and so while you continue, I'm going to go find out what that strange noise in the basement is.
Sounds good. And I will talk about my number 6, which is Rian Johnson's Knives Out. This is just the most pure fun I've had watching a movie all year. This is the only movie on my list that I have seen twice, because I saw it when we got the screener for it. And then last night, my wife and I were thinking of something to watch. I realized she hadn't seen it yet, and I thought it was one she would really dig, so we watched it again. And I liked it even better on a second viewing. I saw this movie on the same day that I saw the trailer released for the new James Bond movie, No Time to Die. And I cannot wait for Daniel Craig to hang up his tuxedo and just make Benoit Blanc movies for the rest of his career. Yeah, Knives Out is just, it is a love letter to parlor mysteries. There's a little bit of Hitchcock in there. Rian Johnson loves genre, and I think he is fantastic at storytelling, just weaving a very clever tale, at guiding the audience through that story, through finding a very interesting way to tell it that through a character who I don't even think was included in any of the marketing materials. I had such a great time with this. I had so much fun with the twists and turns it took, with the way he spins it from whodunit to thriller, back to whodunit. The comedy really worked for me. I think Daniel Craig is a delight in this. I love that foghorn leghorn accent of his. I think on the second viewing, I saw how intricately that the mystery fits together and holds up. This is a rare movie where I spent the last half hour just slapping my knees and laughing at every reveal. And it's a great time. But on top of that, what I love too is it's a genre piece. It's fluffy. It's not overly important. And yet it is a movie that is also about something. There's very unsubtle political subtext to this movie. But more importantly, it's a movie about decency, about kindness. It really is a movie about a kind person and kind of an ode to her kindness. And I just had a blast with this. I really had a good time with this movie. I enjoyed every minute of it, and I would love to see Rian Johnson bring this character back again.
And I will. All I will say is that looking over your top 10, this would be my least favorite film on your list. I'll just leave it at that.
Fair enough.
Here's the thing for me with Knives Out. It's the film where I finally figured out how I felt about Rian Johnson.
Okay.
And that's every single one of his films. And I realize that. I both like them and I'm disappointed by them.
Oh, really?
And they're all, I mostly like them. I don't like all of them, but I mostly like them. And I think with the exception of Brick, his first movie, which is a great first movie and is exactly what it wants to be. And I think it's my favorite of his movies. They are always fabulous ideas with a fabulous opening 30 minutes. And then I feel like he just kind of rides that through the rest of the film. I never feel like they develop. I never feel like they really go anywhere. I never feel like they're really about anything. And so I was like, okay, that was fun. It wasn't as when I finished Knives Out, and I was like, the trailer was more entertaining than the movie.
Oh no!
And the entire trailer is in the first 30 minutes of the movie, and that was my experience with it. And I didn't hate it, but I was like, oh. I wanted better from it.
I adored it. I think a lot of that comes from it went directions I didn't think it was going to go, and it turned into something different than I thought it was going to be. And I had a great time with it, but I think different filmmakers can hit us differently. But oddly enough, Rian Johnson's earlier movies, Looper really sits that way with me, the same way his other ones sit with you, where I think it's a great idea that just kind of doesn't do much more with it. But I was a big fan of Knives Out. I was a huge fan of Last Jedi. So yeah, he's one of those filmmakers I love to see when he has a new one out. But
I love I adore so much of Brothers Bloom, and I loved it at the time a great deal. But 10 years on from Brothers Bloom, I'm like, I don't even remember the last 30 minutes of that movie. Everything I love about it is crammed into that first 45 minutes. And I like Last Jedi, which I assume means that I don't like the Star Wars films as a whole, right? Because you're
right.
supposed to hate Last Jedi if you like Star Wars. just because it's an absolute love letter for Mark Hamill. It was so great to watch Mark Hamill, to realize the extent to which he has become so much better actor than when he was made to be an icon in the late 70s. And that was the fun part of Jedi for me. I've never cared for Looper. I think Looper is just another time travel movie for me.
I will always have a soft spot for Rian Johnson because of Ozymandias, that episode of Breaking Bad that he directed, which is
I can understand that.
Absolutely my favorite hour of TV of the decade. But that's Knives Out, and we are entering the top 5. So you had said the top 5 are your top 5, and I'm really the same way. So why don't you go ahead?
My top 5 are my top 5, and I will be very honest with you. Like I was saying earlier, this list would look different tomorrow. The order of these 5 films could be different tomorrow. Yeah. There is not a lot of separation between these 5 for me. So I just want to be clear that the numbers mean nothing. Don't worry. Don't get hung up on placement.
Yep, I'm the same way. My top 3, cool. I had each of them at one point. So,
and that's same here. Any of my top 3 could have been my number 1, and my 4 and 5 could easily have been 2.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I have at 5 Sebastian Lello's remake of his own film, Gloria, a film called Gloria Bell with Julianne Moore that came out so long ago, March or April, that I was unfamiliar with Lello's original movie. Not so unfamiliar. I hadn't seen it. I still have not seen it. But this is just this is the slice of life movie. This is a couple of months in the life of a middle-aged woman who doesn't have it all together, but isn't falling apart. This isn't a Cassavetes film where we're watching somebody slowly disintegrate. We are watching a flawed and very real human being, embodied by arguably, you can make the case that Julianne Moore's the best American actress. You can make that case if you want to. There's a moment, Chris, early in this movie where she's in like a Pilates class or some kind of class like that, and the instructor gives her a compliment as she's passing by her, and she beams. She is so happy to get this compliment, and it is one of those moments where it's my favorite thing an actor can do, where I feel like I've seen something incredibly intimate and incredibly in the moment, and I for a moment I'm thrown. I don't think I'm watching a movie. I think I'm watching a real human being react in a really human and real way, and the movie had me from that moment on, and this movie's full of moments like that. It is my favorite performance of the year by anybody, and it's been a good year for performers. There have been a lot of really good performances this year, but Julianne Moore and Gloria Bell, I believe it's on Prime. It was for a really long time.
I believe you're right.
Good. It is the kind of movie that they say no longer gets made. And this got made because Julianne Moore saw the original film and said, I want to play that part, got the director to do it again, and she has enough juice to get this done. And, I'm so glad she does. This is the sleeper film of the year for me. Like, nobody saw this, and everybody should. And if there were any justice in the world, Julianne Moore would be among the front runners for the Oscar this year for Best Actress. Gloria Bell. Please check it out.
Well, when you say no one saw this is another one that slipped by me. Even though you mentioned it on our podcast right after you saw it, it's another one that was probably right under Last Black Man in San Francisco as to I need to get around to this, and got lost to school obligations and things like that. But it is on Amazon Prime. I did just double check that, and
excellent.
I will not pass up an opportunity to watch Julianne Moore do her thing, because I think she's always pretty much fantastic.
And an absolutely beautiful supporting performance by John Turturro in the movie as the love interest in the movie. Turturro's another actor I just adore, and we tend to think of him, in Coen Brothers mode, being very broad and big, which he's great at too. He's a fabulous actor who's made a bunch of really good movies. All of his movies that he's directed are interesting and worth a look. And he's just the ideal support for her in this movie. It's this just beautiful middle-age appropriate pairing for the relationship that they have in the movie. And it's just it's just an amazing showcase for these actors. It's a beautiful script, and for me, this is the film that contains my favorite last shot of the year.
Okay. Oh,
and I will just leave you with that. And it is not it's not having her face pecked off by crows. So that's all I'm going to say, and I'll leave it at that.
Well, I was into it until you said that. I'm like, oh, do I want to? So my number 5 is different than that, but it's another smaller movie. One that really, I think the words I used when I talked about it on the podcast, when we talked about it briefly, was it's a movie I'm deeply thankful for. And that is Lulu Wang's The Farewell. The story of a family who lies to their grandma because she's going to die. Yeah, if you put it that way. But this really beautiful story about a family of Chinese immigrants who go back to China because their grandmother is going to die, and they don't tell her. In that culture, you don't tell them, and so they plan this faux wedding banquet. Actually, it's a real wedding banquet, which kind of adds to some of the tension in the movie, as this kind of excuse to have a family reunion so they can be around her one last time and enjoy their time together. This is one of those movies where I don't have this experience. I'm gonna lay a shocker out there. I'm not Chinese. And there's a lot in this movie that, it's not my experience, and yet Lulu Wang's script and her direction dig so deep into the specifics here that they find the universal. I don't come from a family of immediate immigrants. My family came here generations ago. But I do come from a family with tensions and histories and wrestling with our places in culture. And she understands how families work and how they work that tension out. And she filters it all through Awkwafina's performance as a young woman who doesn't quite know her identity and is wrestling with the American side of her and the Chinese side of her and what it means to be that family that left to go off and find something else in America. And it's a really beautiful performance. I think the family is really well realized here. I think Zhao Suzhen, she captures everything that is strong and loving and wonderful about grandmothers. I sat here watching this movie. I saw it almost to the day that both of my grandmothers had died a year ago. And so I was already kind of raw at that point. And for a movie just to say, oh, aren't grandmothers a great thing? And remind you how great it is to have a grandmother. I loved that. But I just loved just how perceptive this movie was. The little details, the really awkward wedding banquet that comes out at the end where there's awkwardness there, but there's joy there. And it's kind of all mingling at once. And then a final reveal that kind of changes your whole perception about the whole movie when you learn the real life story and the whole context in which the movie was made. And it's a beautiful little movie. It has probably the most heartbreaking shot of the year for me, which is a woman waving goodbye in the seen through the back windshield of a car as a family drives away. And that shot killed me. And then... yeah, this is just a beautiful little movie that I really enjoyed, and like I said, I'm very thankful for it. I think it is a really charming little movie, and that's The Farewell.
It is. It's rock solid. There are just films I liked more.
Yep.
I have nothing bad to say about The Farewell, other than, if you want to complain about the digital effects and The Irishman, the last shot of this film is terribly, terribly off-putting. But aside from that, and maybe if you want to dig deeper, you mentioned this, so I'm going to go ahead and run with it. once you get the story behind the story, it's one of those things where, well, that's actually way more interesting than the story.
Oh yeah, I want a documentary about the making of the movie.
And I feel like that's almost like there's just something sort of off about it. I understand why the ending is the way it is, and I'm not saying it should be different, but I also think it kind of I think I would like the film better were that not the case.
That's
I think
fair
the film. I just think that it. I think it is. I think it's such a gentle, beautiful movie that letting viewers off the hook in the way that ending does is a disservice to how delicately and beautifully you've dealt with really hard stuff in a really gentle and loving way for an hour and a half. That's kind of what that's what nags me about the movie, which is to say it's a great movie. See it. Awkwafina is fantastic in it, and that's a sentence I never thought I would say in this life.
That was what kept me away from the movie for a while, which was I don't know that I want to go and that's probably just me being an old man who's grumpy and doesn't want to go see an Awkwafina movie. But I'm glad I changed my mind because, yeah, I was very grateful for the time I spent with these characters. And
yes,
and it's the rare movie on our list that I think the entire family can sit around and watch this movie. And everyone's going to walk away probably a little happier for it.
Yeah. No, nobody under 18.
Well,
but
okay,
yeah.
Yes.
let's not say everybody, but
okay,
let's say yes.
The
older generations can all sit together, yes. Our age can sit down with our parents for sure. Yes.
Yes. What is your number 4, Perry?
My number 4, and again, this could have ended up anywhere in the top 5, truthfully, is Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. This was your number 9 film.
Correct.
We've talked to death about this film already. I will just reiterate, my favorite the best, post Jackie Brown film for me from Tarantino is Inglourious Bastards, because it's an absolute love letter to the power of movies, both literally and metaphorically. And I think that this is the equal to it, because it is a love letter to actors, both real and imagined. And I can't, looking over my list, I always realize my top 10 lists are always populated by films that I think no other director could have made. And this film would not be made by anybody else. It would not be conceived of or created in this manner by anybody other than Quentin Tarantino. And it is a pleasure to watch him have this much fun. Rarely do I feel like his manias and his inside stuff is there just for him. He's always itching for a reaction from you, in a way that I don't find cloying, in a way I like. But this time around, boy, this movie just feels like he doesn't care if anybody ever sees it. Mm-hmm. It just feels like something he really wanted to make. And this is one I have seen twice. And I was so happy with how much I enjoyed it the second time, because I really loved it the first time. And it holds together beautifully. It's a great period piece. It contains arguably the best work of DiCaprio's career, and it lets Brad Pitt be an iconic superhero. Come on, what more do we want when we go to the movies than to watch actors do that?
I will totally co-sign on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. The reason it is lower on my list, might just be recency bias, that I haven't seen it since the summer, and it was just one that other things came in and kind of took over that. But I also did find the last 30 minutes to have that moment, the violence toward women in that has kind of not settled with me in the last few months. I think back to the movie, and I think back to 2 hours of a purely enjoyable, very well acted, very meticulously put together movie that culminates into the things that I have problems with Tarantino, which is the graphic violence, the kind of gleeful violence toward women. And I don't know what to do with that, because that's part of what Tarantino does when he makes a movie, and there's so much of what he does when he makes a movie that I enjoy. So the movie's still on my top 10 list, mainly because I think DiCaprio and Pitt are so good together that their relationship is so well created that you know their power dynamics. You get a feel for their history, and they don't give you a lot of blatant information. You pick this up through the way they work together. So there's so much I like in it that even the stuff that curdles a bit with me still can't keep it off the top 10 list, because when that movie works, it is so enjoyable. And I was deeply chagrined when we put together our Detroit Film Critics Society rankings for this year, and I totally spaced on nominating DiCaprio. I put my list out, and then when we got the results back and saw who the nominees were, and I saw DiCaprio on there, I was like, oh, yeah, I totally did not put him on there. I don't know. I had Pitt on there, but I don't know why I didn't have DiCaprio. So I was able to rectify that. But it is a fantastic performance. And I think Margot Robbie is really good in the small role, too. I think a lot like Anna Paquin this year. She kind of got a lot of criticism for having a role that didn't have a ton for her. But I think the way she's used in that role, particularly when she sits there watching the real Sharon Tate on screen, it is a testament to the power of movies and Tarantino's ability to kind of give real life the ending that it didn't get. I think we talked about not that he wishes it got, but to write another ending. And I think there are moments in this movie that are among the best he's done. The Spahn Ranch scene is an all-timer for him.
The Spahn Ranch sequence is the best horror film of the year.
It's fantastic. Yeah.
I have no other statement than that. And with a great turn by Bruce Dern. I didn't even mean to rhyme, yet I did all the time. It's so good. And I am that was originally supposed to be Burt Reynolds.
Yes.
And I'm not happy Burt died, but I'm very happy it's Bruce Dern in the movie. That's all I'm going to say.
That is a good movie. I need to go back and revisit that. Yeah, like I said, it's lower on my list for the reasons it is, but it's still on my top 10 list, and I still consider it one of the year's best films. So I'm glad it was higher up on yours.
Yay!
So that was your number 4, correct?
Indeed.
All right, so my number 4 is Terrence Malick's A Hidden Life. I don't know if there was a movie released this year that was probably more laser targeted at my interests.
Yes, agreed. Agreed.
Terrence Malick's Tree of Life is one of my top 5 favorite movies of all time. I love it. It is a movie that just causes me to have a spiritual experience every time I watch it. So I'm always curious about where Terrence Malick's going. And for his last 3 or 4 films, that answer appeared to be up his own ass. Which is not really fair. Patrick Willems, the YouTube film critic, he's put together a really, really strong essay about what Malick was doing with To the Wonder and Song to Song and Knight of Cups and kind of the spiritual searching he was doing about his own life. But Malick really has returned with A Hidden Life to deliver, I mean, again, it's not saying much, but it's his most focused film in a long time. Focused on one story that doesn't really meander a lot from that main plot. This is about an Austrian farmer and his wife during World War II. He's conscripted into the military, and he has to decide whether he's going to swear his allegiance to Hitler or deal with the consequences of that. The movie I thought most about when I was watching this was Silence, Martin Scorsese's movie from a few years back, which I'll just say up front is a better movie than this because Silence is one of my favorite films of the decade. But I know Malick was really impacted by Silence and wrote Scorsese a letter afterwards saying, "What does Christ require of us?" And this movie feels like his wrestling with that question. It is a theological piece on meditation, or a theological meditation on suffering. It is about the questions that a person of faith asks about their conscience. When is it okay to, give lip service as long as your heart isn't matching up to it? Is that okay? Is it okay to betray your conscience? I'll admit that I think the reason this movie sticks so far with me and hits so hard is, as a person of faith, watching our country right now and the people I grew up with who taught my Sunday school classes, who instilled their faith in me, as they've thrown their support behind what I feel is evil in our society and wrong. I found so many parallels in this movie. My wife and I have asked the same questions, like what has become of our nation, and don't people recognize evil when they see it? So I feel like Malick was making this movie for people of faith who have wrestled with this, and he just delivers a gorgeous meditation on suffering, which in the Christian faith is often seen as a beautiful thing. In the midst of all this hardship, there is beauty and peace in the middle of suffering. And I think he captures that with, his usual love letter to wheat and grass and animals.
Wheat.
A lot of
fields of wheat. Yes.
And
to quote Woody Allen, yes.
Yes. And it's this beautiful meditation on suffering. And I don't think it's for everyone. I think it is, it's a 3-hour-long movie about this that is largely told in voiceover and letters. And you're either going to get on its wavelength or you're not. But I loved it. I was very moved by it. This was Malick doing what I had wanted him to do, and I was greatly moved by it. I think the cinematography is gorgeous. I think it feels urgent and potent in a way that Malick films haven't in a long time. And again, it's just deeply meditative to me. But that's a hidden life.
Yeah, it is. It's a film that I understand. I get exactly why he wants to do this. It is physically gorgeous. It is one of the most beautifully shot films of the year. And I just couldn't. I got it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I
got
totally
it early, and I didn't stay with it for that reason, as opposed to Silence, which did have me the entire time. And I left. I'm one of those. I am a freak who actually really liked To the Wonder. I think To the Wonder is excellent, and I think To the Wonder wrestles. To the Wonder is about love, and it's also about faith, which when you side those two things together makes a lot of sense. And I just felt that film covered this ground for me, for Malick, and so this felt like Malick purposefully saying, I'm going to make a big important statement now. And it was like, well, you made that for me. I know this from you already.
Yeah.
And so the film is, I would have a hard time convincing somebody who was on the fence asking me, like, I don't usually like, I was okay with Tree of Life. Do I go see this? I can't tell you to go see this. And I can't tell you, and then, to ignore the consumer guide aspect of it. Yes, it's beautifully made. There's nothing wrong with it. I just think he's actually done this better and shorter.
Yeah, and
that's where I am with To the Wonder at this point.
And I think there is definitely the case that were the current circumstances not what they are right now, this is a movie that could have hit me even totally different. And
yes.
And I think there's a Malick tends to hit people very personally. Like when people have their Malick movies that resonate with them, it's for a very personal reason, I've noticed. Like I know Die Hard. What's the Pocahontas movie?
A New World.
New World. I know Die Hard's on that movie.
Yeah.
I love Tree of Life. Tree of Life hits me very personally. I do like To the Wonder a lot better than Knight of Cups and Song to Song. But yeah, that one didn't hit me as hard. But I do like this one quite a bit. This is one that really I felt just a very personal connection to it. But I also absolutely understand when people saw it and were like, yeah, okay, to borrow from another film, it is what it is. But
and to be fair for me, and I will gladly, as always, the truth, the point is to be honest here. I don't. My favorite Malick movie by a large margin is Badlands.
Okay.
Is first. So I don't. Watching this film reminds me that I am, for better or worse, I don't know why, but what I respond most to, not exclusively, I can respond to things that don't do this, but what I want most of the time is structured scenes.
Sure.
I want a character who wants something, enters into an exchange where they're trying to get what they want, either gets it or doesn't get it, and then based on how that came out, knows or has to figure out the next step to take. And Malick doesn't do that. It's just montage. It's just montage. It's just edit after edit after edit with notes that hit scenes that hit a single note. They're not dramatic scenes. They are scenes, because we use that word to donate a chunk of time in a movie that's all about the same thing. And I just, unless he's got me, I deaden to it very quickly. I'm like, I don't care. I don't care how beautiful that is anymore. I've been looking at beautiful for an hour and a half. I got nothing left to give you attention wise. And that happens. That is very much that's an aesthetic thing for me. That is not to say I'm not saying that's not filmmaking, that's not art. It is absolutely. And there are films I like that do that. But here I kept thinking about films like Silence, even large chunks of The Thin Red Line. Like, we covered this. And that's why I get stuck on A Hidden Life. But it's and again, I'm saying all this about a film that I'm saying is a good film.
Mm-hmm. That's what the top 10 lists are all about. Is
exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
But I do believe with number 3, we not only have a narrative film, but we have another tie. We have the same movie at number 3.
We sync up again.
Would you like to tell people what this movie is?
It is Noah Baumbach's Marriage Story,
yes.
A film that I keep accidentally and inadvertently calling Divorce Story. I don't know why. Yes, I do. But yes, that's what it is. Containing one of the year's very best performances by Adam Driver and a couple of more superb performances by Scarlett Johansson and Laura Dern. It's available now on Netflix. It is going to be interesting to see what kind of awards buzz it does. It didn't do nearly as well as I thought it would among the award-bestowing institutions that have announced things thus far, which makes me wonder how it will do with the Academy. But this is excellent segue from A Hidden Life to say, yes, this is the movie that is nothing but well-structured scenes. Watching actors, who classically, I fell in love with movies, Chris, because I like to watch actors act. And boy, there's a lot of actors acting in this movie. And I don't mean that in some sort of, showy way. I mean, I want to watch incredibly talented actors make me think that I'm watching a human creation in front of me. And that's what this film is full of. Everybody is really, really believable. And you get sucked into this world and then just get pulverized by one of the most just sickening fights you've ever seen between a couple that used to and are still in a relationship. Because that's really what this movie's about. It's finding that point at which you are still in a relationship, but no longer in a relationship, and exploring that as much as you can get, by as much as any artist can. It's just a fabulous piece of work. I think it's Baumbach's most adult is a terrible word, and I just want to say it's his most ambitious film, and that it succeeds in its ambitions is just as Eric Bogosian once said in character, it's just the icing on the gravy.
I I totally agree. I love A Marriage Story. It's the rare movie that to me plays like a horror movie at times, and yet to say that I think undersells that this is a movie that is also deeply funny and
Yes.
heartbreaking and beautiful. And Noah Baumbach has had such a great decade. You think Frances Ha, Mistress America, While We're Young is one I really like. Meyerowitz Story. I think this though is the culmination. This is the movie that, to me, like you said, it's his most ambitious, and I feel like it is. The characters are the most fully realized, and he gets performances out of these actors that are just their career best. Adam Driver, he's unbelievable here. Just the amount of range he has to show to go from, at one point, an almost comedy of errors, escalating horror social visit to, like you said, the most heart-wrenching argument. It just so uncomfortable to watch him and Scarlett Johansson just screaming at each other, but in a way that never feels like, the most acting. It feels very organic, and you understand how that argument starts and then gets to the place where it does, but also the emotions behind that resolution to it as well, which I've seen debated a lot, that people have kind of brushed off that scene, but I think that is a very perceptive and complex scene, the emotions that both Johansson and Driver are playing. I think she's as good as she's ever been, maybe since, I might put Under the Skin above it, but Scarlett Johansson is fantastic here. Laura Dern is always great, and I was really moved by Alan Alda's performance.
Alan Alda's great. I love Ray Liotta getting to play in a different gear.
Yes.
I mean, he is still he's intimidating without being threatening. And that's, granted, I'm splitting hairs, but boy, when's the last time you picture Ray Liotta not threatening?
Yeah, I know.
It's been a long time, and he's very good at it. He's a very good actor. And I loved his scenes. It was a pleasure to watch him in that gear, and it was, and yes, everybody, all this fantastic. Laura Dern, I think, is almost, it's almost, it's one of those things where she makes it look too easy.
Yes.
I actually almost prefer her performance in Little Women, just because I feel like that's actually, you gotta do a bit more work there, because that character on the page in Marriage Story is so good and so rich that you can just run with it. And if ever there was an actress who was born to run with it, it's Laura Dern. She's so good. But yeah, it is a movie that I am eager to see it over and over again.
Oh, see, I am terrified of the thought of watching this again, because it broke my heart so much to watch it. Like, I remember I was watching it, and I'm about halfway through, and my wife walks in, and I'm like, we can never watch this movie together. I cannot do that experience. It is too raw of a movie, and yet it is also deeply funny. There's that visit with the social worker, which is just, it's horrifying, and yet it's so funny. And there's the sequence where, it's like, the third movie this year that has someone breaking into Sondheim, but it's so wonderful. The Adam Driver, just the way he delivers that scene is, you understand why he's doing it, why the character is processing that way.
Yes.
And it's such a wonderful scene. And yet it's also this heartbreaking story where you see two people who are as close as people can be turned into not strangers at the end, but they are very clearly not intimate parts of each other's lives again, and you feel that change. That to me was the thing that surprised me the most, was how much he makes you feel the idea that these characters are separating, and not just distance, but emotionally separate by the end of the movie. And it's effective. It is a great movie, and I highly recommend it as well. And I mean, just one of many great movies that Baumbach has done this decade, and another great Netflix movie. For all the talk about how Netflix is ruining movies, Netflix has last year delivered one of the best movies in Roma, and this year has delivered several great movies, including some we've already talked about. So
Yes.
yeah, I don't want to say I'm thankful for Netflix, but I am glad that they are stepping up where studios aren't really stepping up. And if I have to watch Noah Baumbach's latest on TV as opposed to not getting to see it, I'll take Netflix. It's fine.
Yes.
What
Agreed.
is your...
I will not throw out that particular baby with that particular bathwater. I'm good with it for now.
What is your number 2, Perry?
My number 2 is going to be Pedro Almodovar's Pain and Glory, which is again, it's autobiography. It's veiled autobiography. That's not even fair. It's autobiographical, whether or not it's true. And it's about an aging director played by Antonio Banderas, who, of course, has worked with Almodovar over and over and over again. And it is about a director in a lot of physical pain due to his age and the abuses he's put his body through over the years. And it's about him. There's a major retrospective is being done of one of his famous early films. And he goes to visit the actor who starred in that film, and played by an actor whose name I'm probably going to destroy here, but I think it's Asier Exandia. I didn't take high school Spanish. I'm terrible about this. I apologize greatly for ruining that person's name, because it's one of my favorite performances of the year, along with Banderas in this movie. And you start to wonder, is that guy supposed to be Banderas, and is Banderas playing Almodovar? And that's a really fun game to play if you know your history with Almodovar. And even if you don't, there's such fantastic characters that this stands on its own. This doesn't work because it's veiled biography. It works because this is a really great character. And if nothing else, this is a work of a director who understands a director at a crossroads, who doesn't know what exactly they want to do next. And as always in Almodovar, Banderas' characters thinking back on his mother and trying to come to terms with what that relationship meant to him. There is a very enjoyable supporting turn by Penelope Cruz, another longtime Almodovar partner on screen. And this is a film that has, for me, my favorite last scene of the year. It is the type of scene that in the best way changes everything you've seen before. It puts it all in a different light. And not that it's some giant twist, not that it's pulling the rug out from under you. It's not an M. Night Shyamalan film. It is a way that makes you go, oh, and you realize how deeply and how expertly Almodovar has managed to pull off a vision and a statement, a very personal statement about himself and about himself as an artist. It's a really beautiful piece of work. And again, as we've been saying with all these films, it's very funny. There is the best, if you've ever been to a screening where there's a Q&A afterwards with the director, you get treated to the best possible Q&A session ever during this movie. It is laugh out loud funny. And again, as you've been saying, at the same time, incredibly deep and incredibly powerful, and so right for where these characters are and what they're doing in their lives at the moment. Pain and Glory. It'll be everywhere shortly. It'll be out. You'll be able to see it. I think it's out of theaters probably already. Banderas, actually, it may come around because Banderas very much in the running for a Best Actor nomination from the Academy. He won the Best Actor at the Cannes Film Festival for it. He's gotten a bunch of great buzz, deservedly so, for his work here. I've always been a huge Banderas fan. I think he's a fabulous actor. And it's it may come back around, but make time for it. This is the kind of film I would like people not to be afraid of if they think they have to go read a movie, because it's way fun.
This is one that killed me that I did not get to see. You told me about it when we recorded The Irishman. My advisor told me about it and said, "Hey, don't miss this movie." And so I kept waiting for that screener to arrive and waiting for that screener to arrive, and it never arrived. And I was so frustrated because everyone has told me great things about this. So Pain and Glory, as soon as it comes out, I am going to the theater to see it, and I will not miss that one. I was very frustrated that the opportunity did not come up to see it beforehand. I had to miss the screening, I think, for class, but I will definitely look out for that one.
Are you familiar with much Almodovar?
I'm not.
I'm interested very much then to see. I mean, I can't help but come at it with a great appreciation and love for his body of work. So I am curious how it will play for someone who is less, who has lived with that world less than I have. So I'm very, not that I think it'll be a problem. I'm just curious. It will be, you will have a different reaction to it. Not that it won't be just as wonderful, but I'm very curious to see how that plays.
Oh, I can't wait to see this. I will definitely follow up with you on that. My number 2 is your number 6. It is Parasite, Bong Joon-ho's.
Oh, that's what was in the basement. Oh, good. Okay, that's good.
Don't let him out. I said that Knives Out was the most fun I've had with a movie all year, and I mean that. Parasite is the best theatrical experience I've had all year. I had the delight of going into Parasite without seeing a trailer, without knowing what it was about, without even knowing what genre movie this was going to be. I sat down because I had heard so much good things about this, because I have enjoyed Bong Joon-ho's films in the past, and I buckled up and it took me on a roller coaster ride. And I mean that in a good way, not the Scorsese way of saying it. In terms of, it's not a roller coaster ride that is an empty thrill. It's not a Marvel movie. This is a movie that you buckle up and it flings you around from comedy to heist movie to drama to, I don't want to say sci-fi, but kind of kissing the edges of that, to social satire. I did not.
Domestic comedy. Horror movie. There's horror in here. It is a movie that just, from one minute to the next, is not the same movie. I didn't know if I was going to be laughing or screaming one moment to the next. And sometimes I was doing both at the same time. I adored Parasite. Bong Joon-ho is like a cynical Steven Spielberg. He knows how to hold an audience in the palm of his hand and direct its attention, and then spin a story that is usually about a world that is broken, and the only way out is to kind of burn it all down. Thematically, he's playing with a lot of the same issues as Snowpiercer, which is another movie I really like. But he's playing in a whole other league here. There's so much going on in this movie, and for people who haven't seen it, I don't want to say too much. But there is interplay between the characters here that works so well. He switches power dynamics with a sentence or with a turn of the camera. He switches our sympathies. Like, in the same scene, our sympathies ping-pong back from one family to another, from one character to another. He's able to showcase a character's shame through just a simple sniff. There are sequences in this movie that are just exquisitely intense to watch, where the characters are in situations that I can't even describe how they got there, but it all makes sense in the moment. And then he caps it off with a moment of physical violence that could be horrifying or hilarious or both at the same time. And he plays with visuals to enhance the scene. There's an upstairs-downstairs motif that really makes a lot more sense once you know where this movie's going. And it just turns into this funny, horrifying, sad, touching bit of social satire that feels dangerous. And I love this movie. I cannot wait to watch it again. I
this is a movie I really can't wait to introduce to people, just to watch their faces at about the hour mark and
Yep.
watch that dawning realization of what's going on. Yeah, I love this movie. This is a great, fun, and thoughtful movie. It's about something. It's making a statement, and it feels dangerous at places. Yeah, I love this. I love the ensemble in this. I think they play really well together. Yeah, this is a delight to watch. I think I used this with Knives Out, which would make a really great companion piece to this movie. It's delicious. It is a meal. It is, you savor this movie and enjoy every bite. And I love Parasite. It is great.
It is a ton of fun. I love how much of a slow build that first hour is.
Mm-hmm.
That it's not. I mean, you think you're watching a comedy of manners and a domestic comedy and a little bit of a statement about the social stratus in Korea, and then it turns. And I don't want to say it turns into something else, because it's still all that.
It just reveals more of its world.
But it turns,
Yep.
and it keeps turning. And yeah, it is beautifully acted. It is I guess the kind is where we fiendishly plotted.
Yes.
I think that's how I'd like to say it. And it does. It genuinely surprises, and that's always a pleasure. It's a blast. It is something. And I'm trying to not use words, not because I'm trying to damn with faint praise. Like I said, this is number 6 on my list, but just because, as you said, the less you know going in, the better.
Yep.
And it is something. It is worth seeing.
Yes, it is.
This is the movie not to be afraid of subtitles for.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And it just visually, it's so much fun to watch too. The way the house in this movie is such a masterpiece of production design, and the way he explores that geography is really fascinating. Like, you know this house intimately by the end, but he also uses the different rooms and levels of this house to say so much about the characters' power dynamics and who has power at what moment. And oh, it's great. I can't wait for people to see it and email us and let us know what you thought about it, because it's a ride, and it is a very good ride.
And a shout out for how beautifully written each of the characters are, because they are all very different.
Yes.
And very on point. And I mean that dramatically. I don't mean that they represent something. They're just very distinct voices. It's a really well written film.
Yes. I love this movie. I love this movie so much, but not quite enough to make it my number 1 movie of the year. Perry, I think we have a tie for our number 1 movie of the year.
We do. I cannot believe we lined up exactly on 3 different. We did not discuss this ahead of time.
No, we didn't. We traded this morning. Traded our lists, and number 1 just happened to be the same. I mean, it's Avengers Endgame, and we are, just really proud. No, what's our number 1?
Well, obviously it's Captain Marvel.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, if we're gonna really drill this down, you look at the production. No, it's not good. It's The Irishman. We spent an hour and a half talking about it this year. Of course, it's our favorite film of the year. Of course, right now it's going to be at the top of our list. As we've both acknowledged, it could totally be different in a while. Mm-hmm. But you know what, Chris? I have seen it twice now.
Oh, have you?
And I will say, it's even better than we thought. It's remarkably tight. I know that's a funny thing to say about a 3.5-hour movie, but it really is. I don't know what more we want to say. Like I said, anybody who wants to know can go back and dig through a very long, very detailed, very enjoyable conversation we had about this movie. I've got nothing new to report, other than to say, again, I don't think I gave enough. I know we talked about it a little bit, but a lot of credit to Steve Zaillian. This is a really great script.
Yes.
This is a remarkably structured script where it's not a quiet movie. There's dialogue throughout,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't feel it. It doesn't feel verbose. Part of that is Frank himself doesn't really talk much. It's everybody else talking around him. But it's the kind of movie that, like The Godfather, manages to throw a lot of weight in the phrase, I'll make him an offer he can't refuse. This does even more with even less, the phrase, it is what it is,
Mm-hmm.
which becomes this horrific mantra. And that phrase is so prevalent now in in our popular culture and in our society. To put the weight on it that this movie does is just another reason to really love how really good and how really deep The Irishman digs. Yes, A Hidden Life is a meditation on faith and religion, and this is a meditation on death.
Yes.
And how we feel about when we're actually faced with that, and how we deal with death through our lives affects how we're going to approach it when we face it ourselves. It's a really good movie.
It is a great movie. Looking back through my list, one thing I noticed was a lot of my movies this year dealt with the inevitability of death, waiting for someone to die, a world that might not exist anymore. And so it felt like The Irishman was kind of like, and now it's the final word on that. So much of the discourse this year, though, in film circles, has been about this idea of what is cinema. And it's been Martin Scorsese leading this conversation, maybe to his chagrin a lot of times, but leading this idea of, well, okay, when you go to the movies, what's the experience you're going to get? What is different than, a Disney-backed billion-dollar blockbuster and a Martin Scorsese movie? And he was leading that conversation through most of the year. And really, his track record should have been enough to give him the authority on that. But if he had been leading that discussion and The Irishman were not great, that would be, that'd look kind of bad. Instead, he
Yes.
delivers a movie that really, the more I think about it too, I bring up Avengers Endgame as a joke, but that was the movie he was really kind of digging against, was those Marvel movies. And it's really this kind of object lesson. Like, they both are using many of the same tools at their disposal. The Irishman and Avengers Endgame are both 3-hour sprawling stories that really kind of depend on you understanding what the filmmakers have done before. They both use age-defying makeup.
Mm-hmm.
But what's the difference? What's the difference in your experience? Avengers Endgame, you're going to have a disposable experience. You're going to have a movie that you go in, and I had a good time with it. I laughed at it. I enjoyed it. I'm a fan of those movies. I forgot it by the time I walked across the lobby at the end of it. Martin Scorsese takes those same resources and delivers something that haunted me. Still the final shot of this movie still rattles me when I think about it. And that is cinema. That is an experience that can change you. You can think about life differently when you have seen this movie, because the only difference between a Frank Sheeran and us are the lives you live before that death, but you're still approaching the same fate, which is the point of this movie. We all end up at the same point. And this movie is haunting, and yet it's also... I don't find this movie a slog either. I found it highly enjoyable to watch, whether it was an enjoyable, funny moment like the meeting where there's the argument over shorts, or just watching Joe Pesci deliver the kind of performance that you dream someone comes out of retirement for.
It's true.
I mean,
it's true.
It just feels like this is the summation of Martin Scorsese, a lot of the themes he's wrestled with through his whole career. His final word on the mob movies that he's made his entire career. I am sure we will get more films from him. I look forward to getting more films from him. If this was the last Martin Scorsese film, I'd look at it and go, well, that's fitting.
Yes.
And I don't know how I can look at a movie like that and say it's not my favorite movie of the year. Like, it's
Yeah.
that.
Exactly.
And yeah, on any given day, I might want to watch Parasite, or I might want to watch Once Upon a Time in Hollywood more. But The Irishman is, to me, the movie of the year. As soon as I saw it, I was like, it's going to take a lot to push this out of my top spot, and nothing did. Did you have any honorable mentions?
Not really. As I said, I was struggling. I threw over 10 films out of going through my list one at a time and thinking, would this make my top 10 list? And I had 10 films, and I'm trying to think of the ones I kind of wavered on. I truly considered it. Like I said, it's a snapshot. I truly considered. I thought for a half second, would I put Joker in my top 10? Especially talking with you, just to make a point. And truly not as a joke. I mean, I think the film is that interesting. And if I was going to take take a step back from this and make a top 10 list that were, the 10 films that kind of defined the year, it's hard not to consider that movie.
Oh no, absolutely. Yeah.
So, that I'm still thinking about Joker. And off the top of my head, let me see. I got my whole list right here. I don't think so. I literally did just have these 10. Yeah, that really was it. I mean, there's other stuff I really liked this year. There are obviously films that would be in the next 5 for sure. The funeral most the farewell most obviously. I quite liked the sheer agitprop of the Laundromat, the Soderbergh film that's on Netflix now. I think Bombshell does really interesting things. I can't wait to talk about that in a couple weeks when it opens. I very much like Little Women. The Greta Gerwig movie is really strong and a really, again, like we talked earlier, a really fantastic second film from someone who made a really good first film. Something that shows that they can do different things than what they did just in their first film, and yet still it feels like the natural follow-up to that first film. So yeah, it was a very good year.
It was. I had, for the longest time, my number 10 was Uncut Gems. A movie that I don't like. I can't say I enjoy because it is not enjoyable at all. It is a 2-hour panic attack, and I think Adam Sandler is very good in it. But I appreciate a movie that can tear me apart like that can make me that much of a bundle of nerves, and I appreciate the technique. But at the end of the day, I also know I will never go back and watch that movie, and I don't think it resonates the way other movies do. I think it is a movie with a really strong Adam Sandler performance that generates tension very well, that a day later I wasn't thinking about much at all. And then there were a lot of almost. I did want to really mention there was a Japanese movie, a Japanese zombie movie called One Cut of the Dead that came out earlier this year. And I really considered that for my number 10 just because this is really a great example of an independent film crew working on a meager budget to take a genre that is so familiar that it's all cliche by now and doing something very clever and new. It is a movie about a film crew making a zombie movie when a zombie apocalypse breaks out. But about 30 minutes in, it and that sounds like a very cliche, silly, why would I bother with this? 30 minutes in, there is a twist. And it reveals what this movie really is, and it sets up something that is totally different than you'd expect, which culminates in the final 30 minutes of this are some of the most clever independent filmmaking I've seen all year. The way where this movie ends up when you see what it's doing, it's like, oh, this is a really smart idea. And it's a cheap movie. It was made with people who I believe were in a film class together, and it was just kind of thrown together as this little Japanese independent film. It is highly enjoyable and very clever, and structurally does things that I haven't seen a genre movie like this do. So I highly recommend that. It's on Shudder. Apollo 11, the Apollo documentary, is really strong. That was on my list for the longest time.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of waffled on Jojo Rabbit. There's a lot in Jojo Rabbit I really like, but there's a lot that doesn't quite work for me. But I appreciate its heart, and Sam Rockwell in it.
Yeah, I like Jojo Rabbit. I don't think it. It's not as offensive as you think it is, and it's not as deep as you think it is.
Yep,
it's a very fine movie.
It's right down the middle.
That attempts some things and pulls off some of those things. I am Rockwell's such an interesting figure, man. He is able to be so energetic, and sometimes that needs to be reined in by the director. I don't blame him. I blame a director who gets lost in letting him run. And for every time this was on, every time the sequences with him are happening in that movie, all I can think about is you couldn't decide exactly what you wanted to do comedically with those sequences, and so you should have never bothered with Rebel Wilson.
Oh no!
Not that I hate Rebel Wilson, but like that's a different energy, and and it's not an energy that helps you in any capacity understand what you're trying to do here. And I felt like he sort of let Rockwell go, and he gets to be really broad and really ridiculous, and that's why Imaginary Hitler's there. So I'm like, that character isn't necessary, and it just feels like it's there to get laughs at how outrageous it is. And so for me, it's a really weak point in the structure of the movie that the character's even there, and that sort of like affects my feeling about the performance. If that makes any amount of sense. And plus, he takes and makes Richard Jewell worth. If you think Richard Jewell is worth watching, it's because of Sam Rockwell's performance. So I've seen him be great this year.
Yeah, he is very strong in Richard Jewell, as is Kathy Bates, in an otherwise unremarkable movie. But yeah, and I think that's pretty much.
And I was okay with Jojo Rabbit. I understand if somebody really likes Jojo. It's Scarlett Johansson who is sort of, I don't want to say revelatory because she's been so good in a lot of stuff, but she's good there in a way I haven't seen her quite be good. I haven't seen that gear out of her, and it's really good. It's really kind of sweet how melancholic that performance is without ever tipping that off.
Yes, she's very good in that too. But I think I saw that right after I saw Marriage Story, which kind of I still gravitate more towards her in Marriage Story.
Oh, much better part, much bigger part. Yes, absolutely.
And then the one that surprised me and has stuck with me, and I think a lot of it is because of how much I was dreading it, was A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, the Mr. Rogers movie, which was not the cloying, mawkish movie I thought it was going to be. I thought it was a very well done. I don't want to say enjoyable because it does lean into kind of some bitterness, and the main character is purposefully very prickly. But I really liked the way Tom Hanks kind of embodied decency, and the whole movie seemed to be an ode to that decency. And I would probably like that a lot more had there not been a wonderful documentary about Mr. Rogers last year that kind of makes this one unnecessary. But I did enjoy it, and it's like its picture of a good person and kindness stuck with me longer than I thought it would. But yeah, it was for me a 10.
There's the old John Ford quote about how a great movie is 3 good scenes and no bad ones.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that movie is 3 good scenes and too many bad ones. I like the stuff that's good. Like I dreaded it from the trailer, and because of and it played out for me in the movie exactly this way. I found Hanks grating and terrible when he's playing the part on screen. When he's playing Fred Rogers on screen, it's this weird. It's Hanks. That's all I can see. I don't see Fred Rogers at all in those sequences. And that's how they start the movie, with that framing device. And I was like, this is as bad as I thought it was going to be. And then when we cut into the actual movie and we deal with the plot of the movie, he's wonderful. It's a very strong Hanks performance.
See,
outside of that, those scenes, the long conversations between the two of them are fantastic. And it's not that I think I'm watching Fred Rogers, but I do think I'm watching an actor play a part,
Yeah.
As opposed to watching a director cash in on the goodwill that is Tom Hanks, which is exactly what those that framing device feels like.
And I think, I'm sorry.
So, yeah.
I think because I wasn't a huge Mr. Rogers kid growing up, the opening scenes didn't bother me. It didn't, I didn't feel like I was watching anything fake. I felt like, oh, this is an in. This allows me to kind of suspend my disbelief a bit. And because I was so prepared that I was not going to accept Tom Hanks in that role, it kind of eased me in, and I realized that what he was doing is not a full impersonation of Mr. Rogers. I really just like the way he embodied that decency and the kindness, which is just rare. That's the thing I keep thinking of whenever I think of Mr. Rogers these days, is just the rarity of that. But yeah, the top 10 were my top 10, and I was very happy with how it shook out in the end. And that brings us to the end of 2019.
Indeed.
And we will be back. We are doing Best of the Decade in January.
Get ready, man. Get ready.
I am really
It's going to be
that.
good.
Well, in the meantime, Perry, where can people find you?
You can find me on Facebook at Perry Cyber, Twitter at Perry Loves Film. You can hear me on WLBY in Ann Arbor every Friday about 9:45 a.m. talking about new stuff. And you can usually find me center of the third row at your local multiplex.
And you can find me on Twitter at Mere Christianity. You can find my movie reviews now at Big Head Media. Big Head Pop Culture, which is found at bhmpopculture.com. That's where Michigan Sports Entertainment has rolled its entertainment reporting and reviews into. So the same place you find this podcast is the same place you'll find my movie reviews, which will make it nice and easy for you. Or you can just follow me on Twitter or Facebook, and I'll have them up there as well. And we're going to take a little bit of a break to enjoy the Christmas season, but we will be back in January, and most hopefully we will be sitting here in person talking film.
Yes.
And, I am really looking forward to that. Perry, have a wonderful Christmas.
You do as well, Chris. Take care of those beautiful children of yours.
You do the same. Listeners, have a great Christmas.
I will.
Thank you for listening to us for the first year. I'm really looking forward to getting back on schedule now that school's done and really getting you guys some really great stuff in the coming year. So we got some fun stuff planned, and we will see you in 2020.